when power turns its back on those who keep a country running, resistance is inevitable. The ongoing shutdown has stripped away the illusion that this is merely a budgetary dispute. It is something far deeper, an engineered assault on the very people who make government work. Federal employees, from air traffic controllers to public health nurses, from clerks to environmental inspectors, are being forced to bear the brunt of a political strategy built on cruelty and control. And this time they are pushing back. No one believes the excuses anymore. Not the workers who have gone weeks without pay, not the communities watching services collapse, and not the unions who see in Donald Trump's rhetoric the clear outline of a deliberate plan. Trump insists the shutdown is a necessary fight, a fiscal stand for efficiency. But workers have seen this movie before. Behind the language of austerity lies a project designed to weaken the civil service, strip away protections, and centralize power. By calling these firings and furloughs reforms, he attempts to mask a political purge as a policy debate, but the people most affected understand exactly what is at stake. These are not numbers on a spreadsheet. They are livelihoods, families, and the institutions that keep a democracy functioning. The revolt is not loud or theatrical. It is steady, organized, and growing. Federal workers are mobilizing. Legal challenges are mounting. And public sympathy is shifting. Trump's justifications no longer carry the weight they once did because the human cost is too visible, too personal, and too devastating to ignore. The workers who have long been treated as invisible infrastructure are becoming the front line of resistance. And in that defiance, a much larger truth is emerging. This crisis is not about money. It is about power and whether those who wield it will be held to account. A shutdown of this scale does not happen by accident. It is not the product of an unavoidable budget deadlock, but of a deliberate choice, a crisis manufactured to advance an ideological agenda. Donald Trump's narrative frames this as a fight for fiscal responsibility. But the reality is far more calculated. This shutdown is a tool, a means to weaken the civil service, destabilize essential government functions, and clear the path for a more centralized, more loyal apparatus of power. By creating the crisis, Trump creates the excuse, and with that excuse, he seeks to reshape the state itself. The language of fiscal necessity masks a project designed long in advance. It is no coincidence that the targets of this shutdown, public health, education, environmental protection, social programs, align perfectly with the institutions Trump and his allies have long sought to undermine. By furloughing or firing thousands of federal employees, the government doesn't just shrink, it loses expertise, institutional memory, and its ability to act independently of partisan pressure. What looks like dysfunction is, in fact, a deliberate strategy. This is the cynical genius of a manufactured crisis. Its architects can feign helplessness even as they tighten their grip. Trump positions himself not as the cause, but as the reluctant arbiter. the man forced to make tough choices, but the workers who are losing paychecks, the families who rely on frozen programs, and the communities watching their safety nets unravel, understand the truth. This was engineered. This is not fiscal prudence. It is a political purge dressed in the language of austerity. When power plays turn into policy, it is ordinary people who carry the weight. The shutdown, born of a deliberate political calculation, has inflicted its deepest wounds on those who had no part in creating it, workers, families, and communities who depend on a functioning government for their basic security. Federal employees, unpaid and uncertain, are facing the erosion of their livelihoods. Parents are skipping bills to keep food on the table. Young workers are watching their futures dissolve into a fog of political cruelty. These are not unintended consequences. They are the predictable fallout of a strategy that treats human lives as expendable. The most heavily affected agencies are not those with the loudest lobbyists, but those closest to the public health, education, food safety, and environmental protection. When their budgets freeze, clinics close, inspections stop, and entire communities lose access to essential services. Workers who once saw themselves as part of something larger, serving the nation quietly and consistently, now feel abandoned. Their labor dismissed as expendable collateral in a fight they did not choose. This is where the human cost becomes moral cost. To govern is to protect the public good, but to deliberately create a crisis that punishes those at the heart of public service is to break that covenant. Trump's excuses cannot mask the faces of workers lining up at food banks or the silence in shuttered offices where public service once lived. The shutdown is not an abstract fiscal event. It is a human wound-wide, deliberate, and growing. When political leaders abandon responsibility, the law becomes the last defense as Trump's manufactured shutdown stretches on legal resistance is beginning to take shape. Unions representing federal workers have filed lawsuits challenging the mass furloughs and firings, arguing that this is not just a fiscal dispute, but an illegal abuse of executive power in courtrooms across the country. Judges are being asked to determine whether the president can weaponize a budget crisis to purge the civil service. What began as a political spectacle is becoming a constitutional confrontation. The lawsuits expose what Trump's rhetoric conceals: a pattern of governance that treats institutions as personal tools. Workers are arguing that their jobs are not pawns in a political game, and that their service to the public cannot be dismantled on a whim. Judges, too, are aware that their rulings will shape more than paychecks. They will determine whether the executive can bypass the normal constraints of democratic governance by manufacturing crisis after crisis. If the courts fail to act, the precedent will be clear. Any future administration could do the same. For many workers, the courtroom has become the only place where their voices are truly heard. While Washington trades accusations and excuses, legal filings lay bare the stakes in sober, precise language. This is not just about wages. It is about whether a government still belongs to the people it serves or to those who claim it as their own. And as these cases unfold, the shutdown ceases to be merely a political story. It becomes a test of the republic's legal backbone. A shutdown of this magnitude is not only a fiscal event, it is a demonstration of how government itself can be turned into a weapon. Donald Trump has long understood that the machinery of the state, when manipulated skillfully, can serve political ends rather than the public good. In this moment, the shutdown is not simply starving agencies of resources, it is sending a message. It says that institutions meant to serve, everyone can be hijacked to serve the ambitions of one man. It says that civil servants are not valued as protectors of the republic, but treated as disposable obstacles to political power. This tactic is neither new nor subtle. During his presidency, Trump repeatedly tested the boundaries of how much damage could be inflicted through procedural means. Regulatory agencies were gutted, watchdog functions weakened, and public service itself politicized. What we are seeing now is an extension of that same strategy, a direct confrontation with the idea of a nonpartisan public sector. The state, once seen as a neutral platform for democratic governance, is being reshaped into a battlefield where loyalty to a political figure matters more than service to the nation. This weaponization is particularly insidious because it hides behind ordinary mechanisms, budget negotiations, fiscal disputes, procedural delays. It allows those in power to claim they are merely following the rules, even as they bend those rules to break the system itself. In the end, this is not about efficiency or reform. It is about control. And if this tactic succeeds, it will mark not just another shutdown, but a dangerous precedent, the normalization of crisis as a governing tool. Every act of political overreach eventually meets its counterforce. As the shutdown grinds on and Trump's excuses wear thin, the mood across the country is shifting. What was once frustration has hardened into defiance. Workers who quietly kept the machinery of government running are refusing to be treated as expendable. Unions are organizing, lawsuits are multiplying, and solidarity networks are emerging among communities that understand this is no longer just a labor issue. It is a democratic one. A nation long numbed by political spectacle is beginning to awaken to the reality that governance itself is being weaponized and that silence would only deepen the wound. The pushback is not confined to picket lines. Public opinion is shifting to ordinary citizens are beginning to draw connections between their daily hardships, delayed benefits, stalled services, economic insecurity, and the deliberate political choices made in Washington. This is the moment when excuses lose their power. Trump's narrative of tough but necessary reform collapses against the lived reality of families standing in food lines, small businesses shuttering, and public services failing in plain view. People are no longer asking whether the shutdown is strategic. They understand that it is, and they are no longer willing to accept it. In past crises, fatigue has often been the goal, to wear the public down until outrage turns to resignation. But this time, something different is taking shape. The workers at the heart of this shutdown are refusing to be invisible. They are not waiting for leadership to rediscover its conscience. They are asserting their own, and in that defiance lies the beginning of a broader reckoning, one in which a manufactured crisis may ultimately provoke the very resistance its architects sought to suppress. Every democracy faces moments when the boundaries of power are tested. This shutdown is one of those moments. What began as a fiscal pretext has become something far more dangerous, a stress test for the republic itself. Donald Trump's decision to turn the machinery of government into an instrument of coercion has laid bare a fundamental question. Does the state serve the people, or does it serve those who can seize and manipulate it? The answer will not be determined by rhetoric in Washington, but by the strength of the institutions and citizens willing to hold the line. Despotism rarely declares itself with fanfare. It creeps forward through small concessions, the normalization of dysfunction, the quiet acceptance of power without accountability, the willingness to let excuses replace duty. This shutdown has exposed how easily a crisis can be manufactured and then used to weaken the very structures meant to protect democracy. If this strategy succeeds unchecked, future leaders will inherit a blueprint for turning routine governance into a tool of domination. But the line is still there, and it is being defended. Workers refusing to be silent, unions fighting in court, communities demanding accountability. All of these are acts of democratic resistance. The survival of democracy has never depended on perfect leaders. It has always depended on ordinary people who refuse to accept the erosion of their rights as inevitable. The choice before the country is stark. A government accountable to its people, or a government bent to the will of a single man. Between those two paths lies the fragile but enduring line that separates democracy from despotism.